Is this the best helicopter in flight simulation? I've said that statement more than a few times recently, and I absolutely mean it. There has been several high-quality add-ons released for all of the major sim platforms, and the VSkyLabs 902X-NTR falls comfortably within that group. It's not that each helicopter that has been released is better than the last, but I do feel that the fidelity of the add-ons for helicopters and flight simulation has improved so much recently that you're starting to be able to see and feel the nuanced differences between all of the different rotors and systems. And what really makes the 902X special is the NTR, which stands for no tail rotor. VSkyLabs has done an incredible job simulating the NTR system in X-Plane. It's based on the real engineering of the patented NOTAR system developed by Boeing in the late 1970s. The McDonnell Douglas, now MD Helicopters Explorer, was the first helicopter to implement the design of the NOTAR system into a certified production machine. Let's get it started and go for a quick HEMS flight around Tahiti. The 902X is currently in early access and has seen several updates since it has been released. With an extensive manual, or POH, it also has a link to the real-world POH from the MD 902 Explorer. It is stated this is not an exact one-to-one replica. There are some changes and some differences, but it is based on the MD 902 Explorer. Aside from that small caveat, it is pretty close to the real-world machine. It's not intended to be exact, and some of the decisions were made for ease of use as far as a simulated helicopter. But for the most part, the systems operate like the real machine. Is a really good section in the handbook on how to start the helicopter, but it is very simple, just like the real aircraft with the dials for the FADEC system. FADEC is an acronym. It stands for Full Authority Digital Engine Control. It manages the turbines for you, and it has a pair of simulated PW207Es, which are Pratt & Whitney Canada PW200 series turbines that each produce 572 shaft horsepower. That's a max continuous number. They can put out a little bit more, and if you happen to have a failure and you have to go into OEI or one engine in-op, then you can push the horsepower of the remaining engine a little bit higher. That's simulated. In the POH, it does lay out the procedures for one engine operation, and it does go through the modes that you can put the engines into with the switches and how that operates. So you can put one engine into train and it will reduce the power to 92%, and it operates the remaining engine as if you had an engine failure so that you can practice. And it's a little bit different flying twins. It's not like a single engine helicopter where you immediately have to auto rotate. You still have a remaining good engine, so you plan accordingly, and you have limitations that you have to stay within. Your performance is not going to be the same, but that is the whole reason for having a twin. You can still manually operate the throttles of each engine, but it's not necessary, and it's not really something that you would do unless you had a total system failure. It's actually much easier to fly the aircraft operating it as intended and not using manual throttle control or assigning them to a joystick axis. I accidentally had one assigned to an axis, and it actually causes conflicts with your shutdown procedure. And when I tried to put it into idle, the conflicting throttle actually raised the RPM instead of reducing the RPM for cooldown like it was supposed to. Operating this aircraft like you would in the real world would not require moving the throttles unless there was an actual emergency where both engines failed. And even then, you really wouldn't mess with the throttles, you would just go right into an auto-rotative profile. The only time I could see needing manual control of the throttle is if you had a FADEC failure. While we're flying around Tahiti, I'll just take a moment again to talk about how much I love the scenery from Maps to X-Plane. Their scenery add-ons are probably some of the best for XP12, and it really does bring a level of realism to X-Plane that just really puts it on a competitive level. But it does have its drawbacks, and it was something that I talked about in previous videos, but the mesh in X-Plane is really where it needs to improve in its scenery area. It's just too flat. In the real world, there's just not such sharp contrast between the flat ground and 3D objects. It's more of a clutter at levels. That's probably one of the biggest detractors for X-Plane scenery. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. One of the reasons that we give Laminar Research and X-Plane a little bit of leeway on their scenery is how well the other areas of the simulation are done. Back to talking about why the 902X is special with the NTR or NOTAR or no tail rotor system. It's working as intended and properly within X-Plane. X-Plane does not natively simulate the Coanda effect, which is what the NOTAR system uses to provide about 60% of the anti-torque thrust. And even though X-Plane itself does not simulate the actual Coanda effect, it's custom coded. VSkyLabs is actually running code to simulate the output of that Coanda effect. The fan system that pressurizes the tail boom to allow the Coanda effect to work is simulated and connected to the systems and inputs within the simulation. That is actually happening, and it is custom coded to work properly. The pressurized air in the tail boom exits through slots, which is what produces the Coanda effect to provide that thrust for the anti-torque forces. It works in combination with the digitally controlled vertical stabilizers and the rotating cone at the end of the tail boom, which provides directional control. The whole point of the system was to eliminate the tail rotor so that it was a safer environment 360 degrees around the helicopter. Not only does that make for safer approaches into confined areas, but it adds safety to ground crew in operating the aircraft in and around populated areas. The other benefit of the NOTAR system is the reduction in noise when operating over populated areas. It also has exceptional visibility, which makes it ideal, along with the NOTAR system's safety, for operating in an urban and confined environment. That just makes it perfect for the HEMS role. It flies very well, very similar to other helicopters from the MD line. It handles very precise, but very responsive. It has a fully articulated 5-bladed rotor, and I found it to be very reactive and very smooth. It was very easy to control. It did exactly what I expected of it. There are still a lot of features that are work in progress. It was released with one variant, and a second variant was actually added about a week and a half after the release, and that is the 902X-E, which is the extended range version that has external fuel tanks that are pressurized. It's a heavy testbed platform to understand and push the operating limits of the NOTAR system at high gross weights. Flying the NOTAR system is a little bit different if you've never flown a helicopter that has the NOTAR anti-torque system. I've never flown one in real life. I've only ever talked to other pilots about it. It tracks with what I have understood from conversations. The Robinsons I fly in real life have pretty good tail rotor authority. This helicopter has good tail rotor authority as well, but it's not exactly the same. The responsiveness isn't quite as snappy, is how I would put it. It lags a little bit and builds up to the authority, so you have to plan for it a little bit differently. The authority is there, but you have to be ahead of the aircraft. You can't wait for it to happen. If you're behind it, it'll bite you. As long as you're aware of how the aircraft handles and you plan accordingly, it's very easy to fly with authority and precision. one of my favorite things to do with it was to practice quick stops. They were just a lot of fun to do because of the nuanced differences in how the yaw control responds. So it really felt good to nail it once you have an understanding of how to operate the aircraft. The 902X is quickly becoming my favorite light twin to fly in any sim platform. It's a lot of fun, and I really can't wait to see the additional features that come to the model as it's still in early access and comes closer to full release. Thanks for watching, be safe, be kind, and I'll see you in the next video.